Please be seated. It's kind of a peculiar reading, isn't it? It's a strange scenario and raises some questions, I think. But let me just go through it a little bit to start. So the Sadducees are coming to Jesus, and they are another group like the Pharisees, the Sadducees, just like we have different denominations and that emphasize different things and believe kind of different things. The Sadducees based all of their beliefs on the Torah, the first 5 books, the books of Moses. So Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Deuteronomy, and Numbers, and Deuteronomy. And in those books, they did not see any talk about the next life, about resurrection. So they did not believe in the resurrection. So the Pharisees did. The Pharisees had an expanded view. There were other books, other writings that were part of their belief system, including Daniel, which talks about angels. And that was one big difference. So the Sadducees come to Jesus, and they present this, what to them is a big conundrum, right? They say, here's the situation. It's not real. It's a made-up situation, and it's a little absurd, right? As you're listening, you're thinking, So the deal is that a woman is married, and her husband dies, and they don't have any children. So she marries his brother, and they don't have any children, so she marries the next brother, and she marries all 7 brothers. And at some point, you're thinking, maybe brother number 4, 5, 6, certainly 7 should be saying, I wonder if we should order in instead of eating the dinner that she made me. I don't know. Like, what is happening here? So then the question is, if she was married to all of them, then in the resurrection, whose wife will she be? And to them, it's a big puzzle. It's kind of a gotcha moment. And Jesus has an answer, and understanding them and what their belief system is, he bases his answer on those first 5 books of Moses. He says, so remember in Exodus, when Moses is confronted by the burning bush that is not consumed, and the voice of God comes to him and says, take off your sandals, this is holy ground. Do you remember that story? And God tells Moses that he has heard the cry of his people in Egypt, and he is coming to their aid, and he needs Moses to go and lead them to freedom. And there's some back and forth about that. But finally, when Moses is persuaded, he says, well, whom shall I say sent me? And God says, I am who I am. He doesn't give a name. But finally he says, you can tell the people, Moses, you can tell them, I am the God of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. That's who sent you, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And Jesus is saying, notice God didn't say, as one of my commentators that I read, Patrick Wilson, said, God didn't say, yeah, I used to be the God of Abraham and the God of Isaac and the God of Jacob, but they're dead and gone now. I remember them quite fondly. He doesn't say that. He still is their God because they are still living. God is the God. Jesus says, God is not the God of the dead. And my first thing is, wait a second, I'm counting on all of my people who are dead, that they are, and God, and he says, because they are living. God is the God of all the living. And it's kind of like the communion of saints that I talked about last week. I love that image of all the people are still living in God. And so it is considered to be a wonderful answer. And the people are impressed, and it makes sense to them. So that's great. So a couple things about it. I think this idea that the next life is nothing like where we are now is important. That when we imagine heaven, it's often easier for us to think about our lives now and transferring them up to the next life. And Jesus is saying it's all different. And practically speaking, it would need to be, right? So here's a little window into my world. I was married for a long time to Richard Bailey, and after he died, I married Ken Wilson, whose wife Nancy had already died. And in those, especially those first 2-3 years of marriage, we both, each would regularly have dreams in which our first spouse was alive. Either they had come back or we were wrong, they hadn't died, and there they were. And there was this, for both of us, there would be like this elation and joy at seeing them, and then we would be like, awkward, you know, and what do we do? It was all playing out, because I didn't stop loving Richard Bailey just because he died. But I also, as much as I love his brother Charles, have no interest in being married to Charles Bailey. Thank you. I love you, Charles, but no. So back to it's called levirate marriage. And in the book of Deuteronomy, the 25th chapter, it describes this practice, that if a man dies without a son, then his widow should marry the brother, or the brother should marry the widow. And I think in many ways, it was a way of taking care of women, so that a widow had someone who would take care of her. If you have read the book of Ruth, that is at play in that book, where Ruth is a widow. She returns to Bethlehem, where her husband was originally from, and his next of kin marries her. And it's a wonderful, there's actually one a little bit closer than Boaz, and they do this whole kind of negotiation, and finally, Boaz gets Ruth. But it is a very different way of thinking about marriage, isn't it? It's a very, very different way. And women are property, and they're to be taken care of, and it's different. So when people say, you know, I believe in the biblical standard of marriage, I want to say, really? Because there's a lot of weird marriage practices that go on in the Bible, and this is one of them. So as much as I deal with this kind of odd thing of loving two husbands, I don't really ever think about what's going to happen when I get to heaven. Like it's never occurred to me to wonder which one is going to be my husband, because I think it's just different. We're going to understand something we don't understand now. Also, practically speaking, there are some people in pretty bad marriages. And if they had to be in those marriages for all of eternity, well, that's kind of a problem, right? We have to get beyond thinking about it in a certain way. I do believe there's going to be reunions, and there's going to be joy, and we're going to have a chance to experience all of our loved ones and God and God's love in a way that we just can hardly even think right now. But, you know, and we use our imagination to think about what it will be like, but we don't know. We just don't know. And I believe it's going to be better than we could ever even imagine. Which brings me back to the time that we have here, because it is a very different thing. The hymn, Come Labor On, 541, includes the line, come labor on, share the high calling angels cannot share. Angels don't get to do what we get to do. The people in heaven don't get to do what we get to do, which is actively in this life strive to make it a better place, strive to follow Jesus, strive to take care of the hungry and the poor and the stranger. All the things that we are asked, strive to lead good and holy lives. Strive to continually seek, continually give, continually do the work and of spreading the gospel, of sharing God's love, all of that. And it is precious. It is a beautiful, precious thing that we get to do now. And every Sunday, just about, I end up by saying life is short and we do not have much time to gladden the hearts of those who travel with us. And that is a privilege, isn't it? And that's what we get to enjoy now. And someday, something else will be true for us, because God is the God of all, the living. A different kind of living that we don't even know. So when I first saw this gospel, I was kind of like, oh man, it's just weird. What am I going to do? And the more that I sat with it and paid attention and thought about it, I just marvel at the wonder of the life that we get to live now, and the joy that we get to bring one another, and the life that is to come.